Hello and welcome to Ocular Podcast, a place where there are different views about relevant topics in technology and business. Today we have with us Mike Boyle, who is a transformational expert. He is the president of RCM Technologies, an information technology service. He'll share with us some of his incredible best practices and some of the lessons that he has learned in his esteemed career. So with no further ado, I'd like to give the floor to Mike. Hi, Mike. How are you?
Good morning, good afternoon, depending on what your time zone is. Good afternoon. Nice to meet you, Doctor. Thank you for having me on today. It's an honor and a privilege for sure.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I just would like for you to start off, of course, with telling us a bit about yourself, your journey, where you have evolved from, and where you are today.
Sure. Well, I won't go into my entire career. I mean, can I just date you back to, maybe 10 years ago, kind of where we get started here. I was part of a group that bought financially distressed companies, kind of coming out of the financial crisis that we had. We would buy them up and fix them, buy them typically on their debt, fix them, and gather them together and integrate them appropriately. And then after that, we ended up selling in 2017. And then I got a unique opportunity with this company as a publicly traded company. Good core, good bones in it, but unfortunately, kind of went backwards, for 4 or 5 years. Was the flagship of the organization, similar to what I was doing, in 2010 and 11 and 12 and through 17. It wasn't upside down as balance sheet, but the organization itself was struggling from a culture perspective, a people perspective, a sales perspective. It just didn't really have any focus or vision. So we've kind of taken that and we've grown it since 2018. I joined March 2018, and we've grown it since then. It was an $80 million organization. When I took it over, it was about 24 million, and we've got it back up now to about 36 million. So in a very short period of time, we were really able to kind of, fix a couple of things, right? The people, the cultural, and then kind of move in the right direction. So I think that even with what's going out in the marketplace right now, we're in a pretty steady state, if you will.
Fantastic. So you definitely have some lessons, some bumps and bruises that you have experienced that you could share with us and take us through that process so we can actually learn and grow and utilize that in some of our businesses. So thank you for that.
I hope so. I certainly hope so.
So what do you find, is that your passion to actually go into these companies, or what is your passion, Mike?
Well, it's become my passion. It's interesting because, a long time ago, I won't get into a lot of gory details, but I had a commercial landscaping and construction business. And it's very different from what I'm doing right now. And I went bankrupt at the age of 25. So I was really struggling to kind of figure out, what do I do next? And I didn't really have any vision or focus, just trying to, I think I was so shell shocked about going bankrupt at such a young age that it did teach me lessons as I went through life. But it took me a while to kind of figure out what my path was. And I learned some lessons personally back then that I think that's really helped me out now. I was really focused, not on the books. I was focused on the people. I was focused on selling and doing the job and getting a job in right time and under budget. And I just really wasn't. It turned out that my partner at the time was cooking the books, so I had no choice to go bankrupt. But we kind of made it out through there. And when I got into the world I'm in now, human capital, staffing, fixing organizations now where I'm at, I think that journey really kind of brought me here, right? From my own financial crisis to the financial crisis of the last 10 years of fixing these companies that were upside down on the balance sheet, and knowing that there's people behind it, that typically I find that they're good people to the core, what they do, but they again, they just didn't know how to figure out financially how to get themselves straightened out and moving in the right direction. So yeah, I think it's my passion these days for sure. It led me up to it.
Yeah, that's great. You know what I'm finding, something you said that was really key, that you went bankrupt,
Yeah.
on your first venture. And, to come out of the ether, if you will, or to come out as the phoenix and learning the lesson that through entrepreneurship, through being your own boss, through leadership, we fail.
Yeah.
And actually that builds that resilience and that crust to be able to forge forward and to
Yeah.
take bumps and bruises a little bit better the next time around. And
Yeah.
sometimes we fail more than once or twice.
That's true. That's true. It's, I think, I always say there's probably more than that, but there's going to be three major failures in everybody's life. I've experienced them. Even personally, it's going to be, in the business aspect, it may be through anything, right? And if you're not able to really pick yourself up through those, you're going to continue stumbling downhill. It's about picking yourself up. The failures I've learned more than anything else. That's for sure.
That's true.
True. It's a true statement. You hear it all the time. And you tendency have not to believe it, but it's very true.
Right.
It's very true. I can tell you that I really struggled at 25 trying to figure out what my journey was going to look like. And, I did stumble around for a couple of years until I figured that out. And I think you don't go to school for this business that I'm in. I mean, staffing and recruiting where I started out, right, and human capital. So I found this, and the day I got in here into the business in 1999, 2000. So I've been doing it for 20 years. It felt right. It felt right. And then I found that piece that just fit me really well. And I've able to kind of grow from there, not just to do selling and recruiting, but again, really getting in and buying distressed organizations and then turning them around, fixing them. And then, doing that for the last 10 years it's been very, very, very much rewarding for me, for sure.
Well, if you don't mind, let's dial back just a little bit and then
Sure.
Definitely go forward and talk more about being the transformational leader that you are now. The idea of really finding and identifying your purpose, that's a huge hurdle for a lot of people, not only entrepreneurs, but just people in general. So how you said you kind of stumbled around and kind of found your way. What were some of the indicators or the pebbles, if you will, on the path that led you to your purpose now?
Yeah, and getting into the industry, like I said, I did stumble around. I knew what I didn't. I went to I'll tell you how I got here. I guess I went to a company. It was very well established financial. So let me take a step back. After I went bankrupt, I didn't know what to do, and I actually had a friend that was a financial advisor, and he says, "Well, you could probably do this business." So in a month, I had to go get my Series 6 and 63, and I loved it. I loved doing it. The problem was they want you to sell the insurance, right? I was about fixing people's debt because I was in that situation myself. I was like, well, let me fix their debt problems, right? Let me consolidate their debt, right? And let me start having them put, whether it be $20 a week or $100, whatever they can afford in their weekly payroll, if you will, right? Pay yourself first philosophy. Let's do that. So I was really great on the investment side, wasn't so great on the insurance side. So that just wasn't for me, right? And I went to a much larger financial institution, and literally I knew it wasn't a good fit for me, because the day that I walked in, it was really interesting. I drove my car and parked my car, and then everybody was parking a car right next to me. And they all got back out and they put their suit jackets on. They walked downstairs, they walked in, and they put their badge in, went up there, turned everything on at 9 o'clock. And by 11:30, everybody's talking about what they're going to have for lunch. And I was like, what? It was an experience I ever had, right? Like lunchtime. I mean, I did that when I was a kid, but, we never set aside that time. And then by 1 o'clock, everybody was put their computers back on. It was just a robot mentality, and everything had to be, a specific way. And I teach, entrepreneurship when you're sitting in a seat, right? Like there's no boundaries with me, but I was too much in a box, and I just didn't really work for me. So and then I literally saw that. I said, then I talked to some people who I knew in the business, and I actually was referred by somebody who was working there that I knew for years, and they didn't hire me. So I went to the next one, and they finally hired me. But and then I caught on really, really quickly. The first organization that I ever went to, I had a choice between two things. Go to the well-established office where they had, 40 or 50 people, great organization, or go to another office where they were been struggling for years, we're about to close it. And I was like, well, give me that one, because fortunately, I had the foresight. I never wanted to be a number. I wasn't good at that. I wasn't good at structure. I wasn't really good at authority either, if I'm being honest. I really wasn't. I escaped the playground, tot lot when you were a kid, or whatever they call it now, when I was, when I was 5 years old. I wasn't into thumb painting or making pictures or anything like that. So authority's never been, good for me. So I got an opportunity where I could build a struggling office from day one. And I had a wonderful partner. And I always, when I talk, I always talk about her. Her name is Cindy Weinberg. And she was my go-to person. She was my partner. And we just worked so well together, and we've done other things over the years, and, kind of stayed in touch here and there. But she's just, she was probably my spark plug, to when it started out with the transformation of offices and people. She was the first person, to do that for me. So it's kind of what, and then obviously I've kind of grown throughout the business, but that's kind of, and like I said, authority was never my key,
Well,
but I always like to
I was just going to say, I heard
teach.
some key things here from you. I heard that through your experience of really moving away from your first business, first of all, you had the mindset of an entrepreneur. That was first and foremost. You knew you wanted to do something different. You knew you wanted to do something that was out of the box and fit your particular schedule, right? Before you even had the schedule.
Right.
And then once you started that first business that was not successful due to a lot of different circumstances, you were actually able to identify a niche because of the complication or the challenge of the opportunity. And to me, that's amazing. That's really honing in and gearing without unconsciously saying, you know what, I'm going to take on the challenge. Yeah. Because I know where my strengths are. So you self-identified your strengths too, without going through, now we go through this whole checklist and classes and degrees and all this kind of thing.
That wasn't quite available to us 20 years ago, as it is now. I mean, if I'm being really honest, my guidance counselor in high school said that I was going to be a gravedigger. So,
oh my goodness!
I've from all those analysis and studies, and that, I've come a little bit further than that.
Well, and look at it this way: the transformation, which now we're going to start talking about, being this transformational leader and going into these companies, you are pulling them out of the grave. So in that regard,
it's interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting spin on it, but yeah.
Maybe there's something to what they said from a very positive standpoint.
No, I like it. I never thought of it that way. So thank you for that. It's interesting too, because if you listen to the noise, sometimes you believe it, right? So sometimes you have to stop listening to the noise around you, like that you won't make it, or you will fail, or it's too much of a load, or it's too much of a burden to carry. You've got to block it out and really truly believe in yourself, and you go in with everything you have, even if you fail, and sometimes you will. In fact, you fail more often than you succeed sometimes, but and you'll cherish those successes for sure. but not listening to the noise and the naysayers and the doubters was a big key, was a huge key for me.
Good for you. I mean, that's really, really positive. I think that I know from a personal standpoint that I really act and then ask for permission in a lot of cases.
Right.
Because if you hold yourself back, or if you, as you were saying, listening to the noise, or it's coming at you at all different directions, those are stumbling blocks quite often. They take you off your path, you know, and off your, and path is huge. Path is huge. And I want to talk about.
I'll touch on that. I say it more often than not, ask for forgiveness, not permission, you know, to all of my people. So you hit home there too, which is interesting. I say that a lot to people, even to my own people. I say, you know, I'm okay if you fail. You know, if you stop trying, you know, if you make the wrong decision, you'll learn from that, you know, but sometimes you ask for forgiveness and not permission, for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree with you. So thinking about this transformational leader, here you are, you're this mindset, this entrepreneurial mindset individual that has taken on these incredible challenges and said, give me the hard one. You know, I want the one that is prickly and people really don't want to be bothered with, but you saw the phoenix out of that. You saw the potential for that particular department. So let's talk about some of those aspects of a transformational leader. How do you see if you were to look at yourself and then look at the persona of a transformational leader, what do you think syncs up?
It's an interesting question. I think there's a couple of questions in there, actually. You know, I think you know there's a couple of transformational leaders, right? You know, and there are folks out there who I know that, you know, gobble up companies, you know, mash them together and just sell them, right? I'm on the other side of that. I believe that I do a deep dive. I go into, and the financials are always going to be the financials, right? You know, and if you weigh the balance between risk reward, you know, sometimes it's too high of a risk, and you have to balance that out. But for the ones that I have done and the ones I've been a part of, you know, I saw future potential, and excuse me, and you kind of have to put the numbers aside, and then know what they are, and then just go talk to the people, you know. And find out what their journey, as we're talking about, find out what their journey, find out what their passions are. And is that enough, you know? And there are times that the risk, you know, seemed too great, you know, but I saw the people that were passionate about what they do, why they were there in the first place, and how they want to see themselves come out of it. So you make a heavier decision sometimes, you know, if you're looking at, you know, the balancing act with the people, and you say, all right, well, the risk is a little bit high, but I'm going to take the risk out of the equation because I think the people are great.
So it's that unique engagement that you have with people. You mentioned early on that you're a people person. So tell us, you know, that is exciting. I mean, we've talked a few times, and I do see that you're a people person. We automatically got into our vibe, and
we did,
you know, just started having a conversation, which you know is the best. So if you're thinking about people, you're taking the ROI out of it, you're taking the bottom line out of it. Of course, that's something you want to look at. Especially in transformational evaluations, if you will, of a company. But if you're taking that and kind of putting it on the side, if you will, that unique engagement, what does that involve? You talked about just getting to know the people, but dive in a little bit deeper. Unique engagement, what does that look like?
You know, I mean, you're interviewing them, right? And as much as they're interviewing me, right? You know, I'm a little bit more unique, I think, in some ways, because the engagements that I was involved in, for the most part, you know, we would look at them on a Monday and we would buy them on a Friday. So
unheard of, by the way.
And there's the senior partner at the time. The guy was name was Mike Traina. Truly one of the best people I ever met in my life. I mean, he really was a mentor, a friend. Just taught me an awful lot, and he was a great guy. So we would literally walk in there on a Monday, and from a consulting approach, and try to help them fix it. Knowing that they still probably wouldn't make it out at the end of the week, but we would talk to them and say, hey, here's the moves, the levers you have to pull. And some of them are going to be hard, but you have to do them. And a lot of times out of 10, it was too much for an owner to do that. So we would buy them literally on a Friday, or else they would be underwater. But it's the one-on-one, connection, kind of like what we're doing today. I mean, I would sit with, almost every person in the organization, a leader, an administrator, the secretary, someone who ever answered the phones. It didn't matter who it was, the accountant, the controller I've had conversations with before, but and have to make that, and again, I have a very short window to present who I am to them. And I would have to figure out whether they'll accept me as their leader, in a very, very short window. So I think they can, I think that, going into situations, the ones that I went into, what I typically find is that they have been, beaten mentally, right? Beaten down, not just because they may not get paid on Friday and they're worried about that, but because, the owner has just been so far out there that he stopped connecting with the people a long time ago. So they felt lost. They didn't have any guidance. They had no direction. They had nobody to bounce ideas off of. And they were yearning for that. And, and listening for me was, and I do like to talk, but listening for me in these situations is key, because I want to be able to hear what their pain. I want to be able to hear what they're going through, both, personally, sometimes it is personal, but some, in the business, and see if I can glean ways to kind of fix that. So, you really have to listen an awful lot, especially in my situations, to understand whether this deal or that person is worth betting on.
Yeah, especially that unique engagement when you are doing your one-on-ones and you're at various levels. Sometimes those levels, what I have found, and you can feel free to speak to this or, whatever, is to think that in talking with the secretary or the first person that you see when you come into a company may have more insight and have more autonomy in the company than some of the C-suite people. She can work or he can work independently and know the lay of the land, know how to function within their sphere of influence or their domain, whereby the C-suite is dependent upon multi-layers and cannot really make those key decisions that are needed quite often to advance the company. So
yeah, that's, it's a great point. And many of all the companies that I spoke with, it was sometimes the secretary, it was sometimes the office administrator that was really the glue to keeping everything together, the one, her name is Crystal, one of the first companies we did back in 2011, she was so important to the organization. She was best, she was someone to answer the phone every day. So we renamed her title the Director of First Impressions, because that's what it was. That's our first impression, and she was very good at that job. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. So you're going in, you've got this unique engagement happening. You're finding out the pain points of the individuals along with the pain points of the organization, and you're actually able to integrate those two to determine whether or not they can accept you, because, I can see your mind, your wheels, the plates going, because you're thinking, well, is this a company that we are interested in potentially buying? And therefore, will they accept me as their lead, their president or their senior director or whatever role that you identify with, your managing director? Or is this a company that we can say, go forth, do what we need, what we're advising you to do, recommending for you to do, and you can be successful. And bring us back in if you want us to do another evaluation.
Yeah.
So all of these and those are only 2 plates or 3 plates that are spinning. So I could
At the same time.
imagine,
Yeah.
yeah, the excitement and the energy that you're building when you go into a company. How many times have you gone into a company and tell me, you go into a company and they see you coming in your suit jackets and they're thinking, we don't know this guy or this team of people. Who are they and
Yeah.
what are they doing in our company? Because they
Yeah.
usually know when they're in trouble.
Oh, the employees know before the owner sometimes know they're in trouble. That's the truth. Yeah, you try to disguise it and tell the owner or the key players, like, listen, just call us the auditors, call us consultants, whatever you want to call us, but just don't call us buyers yet, right? It's for my side and for their side, it works well. But yeah, I mean, they do. It takes a little bit, you have to earn their trust very quickly. Once you decide to buy, you literally have less than a week to get everybody on board. But what I found through all the companies that I've looked at, the ones that we did purchase, the C-suite was always the problem. I've never kept, I'm trying to think, no, we've never kept a C-suite individual. Never.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
The owners were never part of the equation. We sidelined them for the most part. And I mean, there was one we bought in Louisville, Kentucky, and they, it shouldn't have been publicly traded. It wasn't even that big of a company. You had, we would call it 16 million, and why they were in the public exchange to begin with, I have no idea. So quick story. They had a CEO, they had a CFO, they had an in-house counsel, they had, 2 senior business development executives, like senior vice president, they're paying way too much on. I went through the organization and I was like, first of all, why are all you people here? For a $16 million organization, they literally had, if you look at the CEO, is probably making 450,000, something like that. And then you kind of go down from there, you kind of level set it. But they had close to $2 million in C-suite salaries.
Yeah,
I was sitting
here calculating that.
Yeah, they never get rid of themselves. So if you're the CEO, you get rid of yourself, right? You obviously haven't done a good job. No, ego gets in the way. I think the one thing that people, if I had an ego, it would be left at the door. It's not about that. It's, the C-level. If it's your turn to make the pot of coffee, make the pot of coffee. If you see the trash overflowing, take it out. You've got to be, it's that, if you take a look at a triangle, right? Most organizations are that triangle, right? Where the CEO is at the top of the pin, invert it and flip it around. That's where you need to be. I need to be at the bottom, right? And I'm carrying the load of the rest, and whatever I need to do to make that, that successful, I make it successful. And most that's the horrible statement. But the companies that I purchased, let me put it in that category, all the C-level suite, were looking out mostly for themselves, which is why they needed to go. So they all just left. And plus, it's obviously a financial benefit. We saved a lot of money, but mostly the people that knew the organization, were the people that cared and they were entrenched and they were working, but the C-level most of the time didn't have the answers I was looking for. I don't need you to talk to me about financials. I can see on paper, what they look. I can see your balance sheet. I can see your expenses. I can see your SG&A. I can see all that. You got to tell me what's really going on in the company that everybody's so excited about. And, if you can't answer that question, I certainly don't need you. And then I'll go and find out who has the answer to those questions. And typically I find 1 or 2 people in each of those organizations that is my go-to person. Even today at RCM, I have a go-to person. I know when she talked to me, she was extremely skeptical about who I was, and didn't want she had such a bad taste in her mouth about leadership before, that literally drugged the company down to where it was when I took it over. She doesn't want anybody in there, right? So you've got to gain that very quickly. But yeah, I'm rambling a little bit, so I apologize. But
No, that's
yeah,
good. That's good.
in every organization, you don't, I just got rid of that top layer, and I don't believe in it. I have a very flat organization. I don't believe in a lot of layers at all.
I agree. Well, it's the most effective, flat organizations or
Yeah.
more circular organizations where you can have autonomy and you can
Mm-hmm.
take on your own space, so to speak. You mentioned entrepreneurs. There are very few presidents and CEOs that talk about entrepreneurship. At the end of the day, they want it because you have to have that innovation going on. And I think now, especially here in Silicon Valley, you're on the East Coast, there's a different protocol of doing business on the East Coast versus, let's just be honest, on the West Coast, with the exception of technology. There's some bridges there. But for the most part, there is that new upsurgence, I would say, in the past 10, 15 years or so, where entrepreneurship is just now becoming part of the vernacular, where we can actually look in these larger companies and say, come up with some great ideas and just run it by us, do your due diligence, put it on a PowerPoint and let's talk, let's present. And I think that's an incredible thing. So I was curious about, because we're still on this topic of engagement. I mean, because totally, you're a people person, unique engagement, I think, is really the key to turning these organizations and transforming them. So with that thought, you mentioned trust. What about values? How does that play? At what point do those employees begin to see your values? And because I think that's part of the secret sauce.
Here's my philosophy. One, I create the environment where people want to come to work every day, right? And you do it through the other two. You create the sense of shared responsibility amongst everybody, right? Including me. Like I said, if it's time to make the coffee, make the coffee. Take out the trash, take out the trash. Whatever it is, there's never this, in sales, there's always an internal, I want to be the best salesperson. That happens. It's great. And that's what creates a good culture too. But create a sense of shared responsibility. And my biggest job as a leader of this organization is to eliminate all the distractions. Distraction just kills companies, whether it be, not having the right technology, not having the right tools, not being able to get, what I hear from sales, what never happens with me, is not being able to get in touch with me, right? And everybody has my cell phone number, so eliminating those distractions so that there is no excuses, for not being able to move your own personal journey forward and the company's journey forward along with you. So they're the three things that I've gone into every single company. And it's always in the back of my mind. And that's your focus. That's your passion. Keep it simple, and get there. So create the culture or create the environment. People want to come to work every day, create a sense of shared responsibility. No one's too big for a job, and eliminate distractions.
So what I'm curious about, at what point do you know when you've actually purchased a bad apple?
Well, again, I think fairly quickly there too, right? And and sometimes it's not the whole apple; it's a piece of the apple, right? And if you're not getting the buy-in that you want, or they're just too far gone, and there's no bringing them back. You have to cut out the bad spot, to save the rest of the apple, and that happens that does happen, for sure. But typically it's not. It's not that big a bruise in the apple. It's a small piece of it, and you've got to identify those bruises very, very quickly. There are people that, even though I had the C-suite, I never really kept any of them because I didn't think they added value. But there are also people inside the organization or pockets of companies that we've purchased that just went off on their own and, weren't going to buy into our value principles, weren't going to go, just decided to kind of go rogue, if you will. And then if they weren't going to be part of our long-term process, you've got to cut them out. And you got to cut them out quickly, but
You probably see, I was just going to add, you probably see the bruise in your one-on-one engagement and your unique engagements. You probably already see the bruise. So
yeah,
it's not a surprise when it gets too soft and you're
going, that's true. That's true. But, then you see the bright shining stars, that
Yes.
come out of this. I think the one thing that I'm, if I can brag for a second, my retention ratio, not turnover ratio and that's what I judge myself on, it's through the roof. I'm, very, very high, percentage on it, but, people know where I say, I'm very, very to the point, very direct, everybody's always going to know where they stand with me, on any topic. Right. So they, if they don't want to be a part of the movement going forward, then that's okay. We'll help you find something else. But my retention ratio for all of these acquisitions is at a very high level. And what I want to try to do is my job is to get me to a point, get the organization to the point where they don't need me.
Wow.
I can replace myself with somebody else. So once, and when I find those people that can say, hey, it's now your baby, you take it the rest of the way. Right. And I'll be here, for guidance and counsel and whatever you need, go on a sales call, do whatever it is you need to do. But once it's ready, let them fly. And typically we'll see a much greater return when they're allowed to fly. So
and this is why you're called. I was just going to say, Mike, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, this is why you are called the transformational leader or coach. You are the ultimate. I mean, seriously, you've got the total engagement. You have all of, and I called it the unique engagement, and you covered all of that with the trust, as well as, honing in on the value, understanding the pain points. And then you've gone into this whole, I'm just so excited, gone into this talk down the path of looking at the transparency, being transparent to them so they can actually become motivated to stay and be a part of the team and want the best for the company, really buying into that, the vision and the mission of the company. And that's huge. That's why your retention rate is high. Also.
Yeah, I like to think that for sure. I want to promote, leadership and leadership qualities and, with my people. And that I think for me, that's the most rewarding. I always know when I should be replaced, if you will, and move on to the next thing, right, if you will. And not that I do. I mean, whether it be, through a sale or, buying another, finding something else that's broken and fix that. It's interesting. I was never good with my hands fixing anything, but I can fix companies.
Well, Mike, this has truly been a treat for me. I know it will be a treat for our listeners to understand wonderful. And to have a path in which they could go down as transformational leaders, as leaders within their departments, their organizations, and for their personal development. So, Mike, I just want to thank you for being on Ocular today. And is there a little nugget? You left us so many nuggets, so many pebbles, I called them earlier. So many pebbles going down this path. Is there a special pebble that you would like to leave with us today?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure, Doctor. It really is. I don't know if I have, true words of wisdom, if you will. Know yourself to the core, and keep all the noise, out, because there can be. Again, I said from the very beginning, I think one of the best things I did is I didn't listen to the naysayers. I didn't listen to people say, you can't do this, you can't do that. Take the journey, go in there with both feet, and you'll explore who you are, for sure.
Fantastic. It starts with you.
Yeah. It does.
So thank you again for Mike for being a part of this. And I look forward to remaining in your relational network,
Absolutely, Dr.
in your
Thank
ecosystem.
you.
Thank
For
you
sure.
very, very much. And
Thank
take
you, Doctor.
care.
All right,
Thank
you
you for
too.
being
Take
on the
care now.
Ocular podcast.